Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 6, 2024 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum present tonight. No public comments were registered, so our first item of business is to approve the minutes of the February 21st, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. So we had a chance to review those ahead of time. Did anybody have any additions or corrections?
If there are none, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Jacob?
Ms. Saberwater.
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton.
Aye.
Mr. Harris.
Aye.
Mr. Prince.
Aye.
Mr. Silas.
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye. Mr. Blomley, I think you have some introductions for us tonight.
I do. I'm very pleased to introduce a few additions to our department. First of all, Mr. Ben Newman, who is the new Director of Land Management and Planning, started last Monday. Mr. Newman comes to us from Caney Fork Electric in McMinnville. A number of years of working as an attorney as well, brings a vast wealth of experience to our department, and we're very happy to have Mr. Newman on our team. Also, Mr. Richard Donovan is our new principal planner, and Mr. Donovan comes to us from a number of jurisdictions, Lebanon, one of them, as well as Portland, Lakeland, and he also worked for a consulting firm in Oxford, Mississippi. So we are very excited to have Mr. Donovan on board. And then also, we're very happy to have Mr. Jonathan Escobar-Marin here as well. He is our intern this semester from Dr. Francis Cody's class at MTSU. Pleased to say that Mr. Escobar-Marin's future is very bright. He's been an excellent intern with us so far.
Great. Well, welcome, everyone. We look forward to working with you, gentlemen, and excited to hear about the internship. That's wonderful. So we have several public hearings, I believe 5 tonight. We'll get started with those. The first item we have is a mandatory referral to consider the abandonment of the entire right-of-way of Due North Drive, north of Sulphur Springs Road. James Pinson is the applicant. Mr. Blomley, I believe you're going to bring this one up for us.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a right-of-way abandonment that is located along the north side of Sulphur Springs Road. It's for a small segment of right-of-way of Due North Drive, which was platted several decades ago, and it was stubbed into the property to the north. You see where Pavilion Place is. Pavilion Place is part of the Breckenridge subdivision. Pavilion Place basically eliminated any chance of Due North Drive ever extending to the north, and it is basically serving as a private driveway to the two residences on either side of it. So both of those two residences get their access from Due North Drive, and so it really serves no public purpose anymore, although there are some utilities and drainage in it that would need to be accommodated through easements, but there's really no chance of it ever being extended to the north. There's a single-family home that was built directly in its route. The property owner on the east side of Due North Drive has an existing accessory structure that was built several years ago in violation of the setbacks. It wasn't something that the current property owner did. It was a previous property owner. And then also the owner of that property, who is also the applicant, would like to build a separate accessory structure, but is limited from a setback standpoint because technically now it's a corner lot because it fronts on two public rights-of-way. And so what this would do is if this were abandoned, then it would become a regular interior lot with a front setback, a rear setback, and two side setbacks, which would give him much more flexibility in the placement of that accessory structure. So we surveyed the various utilities and city departments. No one had any objections to the abandonment of this right-of-way. And a summary of their responses can be found in your agenda packet. So based on the responses received, staff recommends the following conditions of approval be applicable to the right-of-way abandonment. Number one, the applicant shall prepare and submit legal descriptions and exhibits necessary for the city legal department to draft any necessary legal instruments, i.e. a quitclaim deed. Such instruments shall be subject to the final approval of the city legal department. Number two, the applicant shall be responsible for the recording of the legal instruments, including payment of the recording fee. Number three, the 50-foot wide abandoned right-of-way shall be combined with contiguous property via a duly approved and recorded subdivision plat while retaining a 50-foot drainage, utility, and access easement in its place. So it ends up becoming private property, but with an easement over top of what used to be right-of-way. So as with all right-of-way abandonments, we customarily conduct a public hearing. I'm presenting this for Ms. Smith, and I know Mr. Aguilera has had contact with the applicant, and I'm not sure if the applicant is present tonight. Yes, there he is, right there. So if you have any questions for him, he's available in the audience. Otherwise, we'll need to conduct a public hearing and then vote to make a recommendation to City Council.
Okay. Anybody have any questions before we open the public hearing? All right. So we will have the first public hearing tonight. As with all the other public hearings tonight, if you decide to speak, you will come forward to the podium, state your name and your address for the record, and then you have 3 minutes to make your comments to the Planning Commission. We do always ask that all your comments are made directly to the Planning Commission and not to other members of the audience. And not to any developers, or just tell us what you think, and then we'll take it from there. So with that, we will open the public hearing and ask if there is anybody that would like to come forward and speak on this item. Anybody? Okay. Seeing none, then we will close the public hearing. See if anybody on the Planning Commission has any further thoughts or questions. And if not, we'll be ready for a motion.
A motion for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Jacob?
Ms. Saberwater,
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Prince,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Our next item is an annexation petition and plan of services for approximately 160 acres located at the western terminus of Asbury Road. The G.S. Dismukes and Barbara W. Dismukes Revocable Living Trust is the applicant. Mr. Blomley, you're going to take this one for us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. The property is on the map in the yellow color before you. It's 160 acres approximately. And as you mentioned, it's at the western terminus of Asbury Road. Asbury Road was bisected with the construction of Interstate 840. So this is on the segment of Asbury Road that is west of 840 and directly adjacent to I-24. It's directly to the west of what is better known as the Sazerac property. So some of you may remember the Sazerac property going through the annexation and zoning process 3 or 4 years ago. So this is the Sazerac property here, and here is the Dismukes property. The Dismukes have filed a petition requesting the annexation of their entire 160-acre property on the east side of I-24. They also own property on the west side of I-24, but this is just for the property on the east side of I-24. Access is somewhat limited to the subject property. It is only accessible via the Asbury Road terminus, and Asbury Road is kind of like a service road directly adjacent to the interstate. So if you are driving on Florence Road and you take an immediate left after the overpass, it takes you down Asbury Road through the Waldron subdivision, Thistle Downs, I believe, and then parallel to the interstate. The property is primarily undeveloped. There's one barn structure on the property as well as 5 billboards. So it's the extension of services to the property in its current state will be relatively minimal. There's really, very little city services or utilities that will be required to serve the property in its current state. However, significant infrastructure upgrades will be required once the property develops. And I believe that of course, the service providers are aware of that, as well as the applicants and their potential buyers. There's no companion zoning request with this property right now, as the applicants wanted to request annexation prior to a zoning request coming through or being submitted in the near future. I do think that we will see a zoning request come through for this property in the near future at some point. Don't know exactly when, but since there's no companion zoning request, since it's zoned RM, residential medium density, in the unincorporated county, it would be given an RS-15 single-family residential district zoning classification upon annexation if it is approved by Planning Commission and Council to be annexed. As I mentioned, there are significant upgrades in infrastructure, both utility and roadway infrastructure, that would be required if and when the property is developed, and that includes the extension of Cherry Lane through this property for a potential interchange with I-24 here, and that would be something that would be negotiated with whoever develops this property, as well as the Waldron property to the east, and of course TDOT with the inclusion of a potential interchange at this location. Then also upgrades to electric services, water and sewer would be needed. But as I mentioned, in its current state, the property would be relatively easy to annex because the demand for city services would be relatively minimal. The plan of services for the property in its current state is located in your agenda packet. We would ask that you conduct a public hearing on this matter on both the annexation and plan of services, and then discuss and then formulate a recommendation for council. Mr. Matt Taylor of SEC is here representing the Dismukes family as the applicants. Be happy to answer any questions.
And is there a presentation or just for questions? Gotcha. Any questions from the Planning Commission before we open the public hearing? Okay, so we will open the public hearing and ask if anybody would like to come forward to speak on this item. Welcome.
Yes, thank y'all for being here. My name is Pat Justice. I live at 8081 Old Jackson Ridge Road in Rockvale. The issue that I'm here right now is we have adjoining property, and at some point my family was contacted and wanting us to sign over certain rights, and I'm trying to get clarification on that to what they want signed over, because what I understand, they're wanting to be able to come in from the Burleson Lane in to access this property also, which will require us to sign over part of our property, and we're not going to do that. So, you know, if you have the map up there where I could have a pointer to point you, because part of my question is, I have issues of where the property lines run, okay? The reason I'm telling you this, I've lived out there over 60 years, okay? My sister, which is in Arkansas, my mother, which is bedridden, and I are probably the only three people that actually know where the real property lines run out there. That's what I'm here to represent my family with this and get clarification on, because half the road that the Dismukes own, they own one half of it, we own the other half of it, all the way down to our property line. And like I say, there's an issue with the county, and they're being presumptuous that they own property that they don't own as far as Justice Road pertains to. Back in the 60s, my father signed over our driveway, so we didn't have to walk down to Burleson Lane. Okay, that road ran all the way up to our field, okay? It dead ended into the field. We had a turnaround driveway for the bus, okay? That was in the early 60s, 63, 64, somewhere through there, okay? Let's jump ahead to the 70s. In approximately 72, we decided that we wanted to put a road in. We coordinate this with, at that time, it was Byford Armstrong owned the property, and with also Mr. Dismuke. And so all this stuff was coordinated, but like I say, I'm one of the very, very few people that actually knows where the property lines run. I talked to Mr. Toon the other day, and he didn't even realize that once you get to a certain point on our road, all of a sudden he owns half the road. He didn't realize that. And to make things clear, where my ex-wife, Evan Justice, lives, from her yard all the way to the other side of the road is our road. If the county thinks it's theirs, it's not the county's, okay? It never been paved by the county initially. The reason I'm telling you this is, all right, after Byford Armstrong owned that property, Sam and Knox Ridley bought the property. Well, what Sam and Knox decided to do, they were like a mayor and a governor, a judge in Smyrna. They decided that they wanted to dump Smyrna sewage on their property. So what they did is they made a deal with Smyrna saying, well, hey, since, we're having to, use this road for sewage to get to they actually paved that road, Smyrna did. It's still our road, but nobody ever got signed over. So that's what I'm saying. I'm here more to find out where these boundary lines are supposed to run, because it's conflicted, because they're not running the way people think that they're running. And that's what I want to get clear, so we're all on the same page of what's getting annexed and what's not getting annexed.
Yes, sir. That all your comments at this?
I mean, I'm looking for an answer right now where the property lines run.
Well, we will take everybody's comments tonight that is here to speak about this item, and then at the end, we'll address all of them.
Okay, well, here's my question. How do you know where the property lines run?
There'll be surveys of the property.
It still goes back to the simple fact that part of the road that us and the Dismukes own, because they wanted us to sign the property over. That's why I came in, because
Yeah.
if you're only working with your property, you don't need us to sign anything over. You know what I'm saying? Right of ways or anything. So that's one of the big issues. I'm here because apparently they think that they're supposed to have right of way to our property, which they don't.
Well, there'll be title searches, deeds reviewed all the way back. The road, we have to figure out whether it's a city road, county road, not a city road, county road or private road.
And Ms. Jones, I think at the end of the public hearing, I can shed a little bit of light.
We'll address all those, yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. Who else would like to speak tonight on this item? We'll make sure we get everybody's questions answered. Anybody else? Okay. We will close the public hearing. Mr. Blimey, you want to address some of those
Sure.
issues he's bringing up?
So, and this was a question that we had as well when the annexation request came in, because we noticed it was a little bit different than the parcel lines. So if you look at, and I'll show you here first, there's this Justice Road that comes in off Burleson Lane, and there's a segment of what appears to be right-of-way on the GIS system, which the property lines there are based on the parcel maps from the property assessor's office. And so SEC, the surveying firm who is representing the justices, submitted a boundary survey, and there was a deed book reference to where half of that roadway, that roadway was abandoned, with half of it going to the Dismukes family, and only on the portion that is directly adjacent to the Dismukes property, and half of it going to John and Jenny Justice across the road. So you can see on the on the boundary survey that SEC provided, there's a deed book and page reference for that abandonment and subsequent, and I believe subsequent quitclaim to either of those property owners. And so we then drafted our maps consistent with the boundary survey that was provided by SEC. And Mr. Taylor, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium, seeing if you have anything to add. But you'll see how we adjusted the property line here to go down the middle of the Justice Road, what is shown as the Justice Road right-of-way, adjacent to the Dismukes property. But it does not affect any portion of the Justice Road right-of-way to the north of the Dismukes property.
But I think obviously, we would need to provide Mr. Justice with a copy of this deed book and page that we're referencing, and I think that'll be an easy answer to some of that questions, just for him to see that and understand why it's being shown like it's shown. But what else can you provide for us, Mr. Taylor?
I've got my contact information, phone number, email that I'll provide him before he leaves. If he wants to come sit down, I'll have my surveyor made available along with the survey that we did and make sure that everybody's in agreement, or at least show him where we're seeing this data at. So we're happy to do that.
Okay. So I think that gets most of Mr. Justice's questions, is mainly to do with the road. That seemed to be the only place where he had the question about the property line discrepancy, best I understood, so.
And I think as far as access to this property, whether it's annexed or not annexed, doesn't change anything about how this property is
Right.
annexed. We're simply changing the jurisdiction. And I think access for future development on the property would be a bridge that we would cross at some point in the future. But as far as the property in its current state, its annexation would not change anything about the access to it.
Okay. All right. What other questions or comments did we have regarding this annexation petition? Anybody?
Maybe just a comment that, given its annexation without the accompanying plan for the zoning, and I know it converts automatically to the RM15,
RS-15.
RS15. Just to say that I don't, not speak for the planning commission, but it's not something where we want to see high-density housing and all that stuff. So just maybe keep in mind as they're going through the next processes that.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because we did identify, knowing that this was a location for a potential interchange on our future land use map, we did identify the area directly adjacent to I-24 on this property as general commercial. And then to the north of that, we've identified it as suburban residential. So transitioning from general commercial up to a lower density residential is what our adopted future land use map recommends. Exactly what the plan is that is going to be proposed by whoever tries to develop this property, I don't know. I would imagine it will probably differ a little bit, at least a little bit from that. But certainly we will be watchful of that and mindful of those comments.
Very good. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
There are none. I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second?
Motion and a second. Ms. Jaco?
Ms. Savelwater,
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Prince,
Aye.
Mr. Silas.
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye. Okay. Thank you very much. And we will move on to the next item, which is an annexation petition and plan of services for approximately 0.47 acres located at 3416 South Church Street. Wesley H. Allen and Tanya C. Allen are the applicants. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for just a little under half an acre along the west side of South Church Street. It's directly to the south of property that y'all considered for annexation and zoning about a year ago, that is located on the corner of Highfield Drive and South Church Street. It is directly adjacent to the existing city limits. It's within the city's urban growth boundary. There's an existing development that is under construction directly to the north. So that being said, the plan of services that's included in your agenda materials shows that it would be relatively easy to annex this property and provide services to it, as our city rolling services are already in the area, and utilities are already available, although I think there is some extension of the sewer that would have to occur, but that will be relatively minor. So we'll need to conduct a public hearing on both the annexation and the plan of services for this annexation request. And if you have any questions of the applicants, and this is just for the annexation only, Mr. Chris McGuire and Mr. Clyde Roundtree from Huddleston Steel are in attendance if you have any questions.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions before we open the public hearing? Okay. So we will open the public hearing at this time, and this is for the annexation petition and plan of services only. The next public hearing will be regarding the zoning application. So if there's anybody that would like to speak on this application, please come forward. Anybody? Okay. We'll close the public hearing. Any further questions from the Planning Commission?
If there are none, I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second?
Motion and a second. Ms. Jaco?
Ms. Saberwater?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Prince?
Aye.
Mr. Salas?
Aye.
Chair Jones?
Aye. Okay, next we have the zoning application for approximately 0.47 acres located at 3416 South Church Street to be zoned to PCD. It's 3416 South Church Street PCD, simultaneous with annexation. Greg Patel is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the companion zoning request with the previous item on the agenda. Mr. Greg Patel has a contract on the property and is requesting that it be zoned to PCD, Planned Commercial District, simultaneous with its annexation. As mentioned in the previous public hearing, this is for 0.47 acres located along the west side of South Church Street, just to the south of Highfield Drive. There's an existing single-family home on the property that would be torn down if the zoning request is approved. Much like the property directly to the north, this applicant is requesting a planned commercial development for a two-tenant commercial building. Because of the size of the property, it's relatively limited with regards to the types of tenants that could be in there. So there's really no food service uses that would be allowed just because of the parking demand. So it would be, general neighborhood, commercial, and retail type uses, very similar to the property directly to the north. It would have access both to the property to the north via an access easement to get back to the intersection of Highfield Drive, although Highfield Drive is not a signalized intersection. So there would be direct access onto South Church Street as well, but it would be right in, right out. We'll make provisions for a stub in the parking lot, for a driveway stub to the property to the south, so that eventually, as the properties to the south develop, traffic can meander through those properties and get back to the signalized intersection at Linford Drive / Joe B. Jackson Parkway and South Church Street. The surrounding properties and zoning, as I mentioned, the property directly to the north is zoned PCD. The property directly across South Church Street is zoned PUD, Planned Unit District, for the marketplace at Savannah Ridge planned development. Shopping center where Aldi has been constructed, and there are a couple of multi-tenant retail buildings located along the frontage in front of the Aldi that are under construction. And just recently there was a Wendy's restaurant approved there as well in front of the Aldis. And so I think we'll continue to see additional development there over at the marketplace. Directly to the south and to the rear of the subject property to the west are existing single-family residences in the unincorporated county. And Mr. Roundtree will go over in just a moment how he intends to screen those existing residents from this development. I will mention, though, that in the adopted future land use map, you'll see that we made provisions for these existing homes on these properties that are front on South Church Street with existing homes to be redeveloped with neighborhood commercial uses to transition from South Church Street to these established single-family residential neighborhoods in the unincorporated county. So I think it's reasonable to anticipate that the properties to the north, that we'll see requests for annexation and zoning of those properties for commercial uses in the future. As a matter of fact, I think the property owner to the south has accumulated several of the properties and I believe has been talking to Mr. McGuire and Mr. Roundtree about at some point in the future moving forward with similar requests for his property. With that being said, I'd like to invite Mr. Roundtree up to the podium to make a presentation. And Mr. Roundtree, your pattern book is up on the, so if you go down to the taskbar at the bottom, you'll see the PDF and you can pull it up there.
Taskbar at the bottom, how about the top?
Should be at the bottom.
Oh, there, wait, Matthew. Okay, there it is. Okay, we got full screen. Where's our full screen options?
You control L.
Chairman Jones, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Rounder, host of Steel Engineering. I'm also here with Chris McGuire, who's an engineer representing this project. And we are representing Mr. Greg Patel on this particular project as well. First off, just want to thank you for hearing our opportunity for requesting this rezoning. We have done some decent research. SEC did the project to the north, so we basically took a lot of the cues from that development in terms of buffer requirements, architectural style, so I'll walk you through that. I'm just going to hit the high points of the pattern book that I think are relevant, and Matthew does a great job on the introduction. So on sheet 10, the arrow has not been updated, but as Matthew mentioned, there's quite a bit going on in this area. We worked on the marketplace at Savannah Ridge, so that's directly across from this development. As Matthew mentioned, the property to the north is now being developed as a commercial building as well. I think it's going to be a urgent care center. So that's under construction and it's going well. So as was mentioned on Highfield, we'll have a access easement that's coming through coming through the property to the north and going to our property. And as Matthew mentioned, we're going to go ahead and allow stub properties to the south. The owner to the south of our property came to our neighborhood meeting. He did discuss his future plans. He owns 3 of the properties. He owns one directly to the south from us. He also owns a deeper piece of property that's to the south. And he owns one that adjacent to Joby Jackson. So he's got some future plans, but nothing at the present to do anything currently. It's important to know because one of our exceptions in our pattern book is an exception to that southern property line and how we treat that. So I just want to bring that to your attention. Page 14 is the overall site plan. So as was mentioned, we have the property to the north as referenced in the pattern book, shows exactly how that's developing. We're tying into the same roadway circulation drive aisles that they provided. So we are a 3,600 square foot building. It's going to be a 2-tenant, as Matthew mentioned, 2-tenant occupants. We don't have those occupants picked out, but in the pattern book, we did make some exceptions to what would be allowed on this piece of property. And an exception to any kind of restaurant is basically we pulled those out of our options. So we limited our use in terms of what could be used here. So the owner's in agreement with that. That there will be no restaurant. As Matthew mentioned, we don't have the capacity for parking to provide a restaurant at this location. So we parked it at 1 space per 250 square feet. So that was what we were able to do with 3,600 square feet. The architecture is, I think I mentioned this at our prep meeting, but the architecture takes a lot of the characteristics that we're seeing along the gateway. A lot of our clients are constriving to that's becoming the Murfreesboro standard, where you have undulated roof lines, defined bases, defined caps, variated fronts, multiple materials, a large percentage of glass on the front of the building. So we feel like the building is very attractive, but it's exactly complementary to the building to the north. Same architect, so we think it'll be a real complementary project to the adjacent project as well. As far as the overall landscaping of the project, there's 2 things. One of those is we don't have per se a formal open space as required. Typically with a plan development, we do have a area that's serving that purpose. So that little graphic on the right shows where our seating area is going to be along the front. And we're also enhancing landscape in lieu of having a formal open space. The reason is at one point we had it between the buildings and it was just kind of cramped in there. We felt like it'd be much more of an amenity along the front. It's an enhanced patio area as well as an enhanced front facade. So just want to bring that to your attention. And then as was mentioned, on the southern portion of our property, that's where we were asking for an exception, because typically that would be a buffer. Because we're up against residential, but knowing the future of the property to the south, We are just basically providing a privacy fence with a median, basically an internal median that eventually will tie into the road circulation, the internal circulation to the property to the south. So at this point, we're minimizing the amount of landscaping, providing the fence, providing some landscaping, but not what would typically be required against a residential development. And the last thing I want to bring to your attention that I think is important is we've had negotiations with the state to change our access point, and we wanted to include it in the pattern book so this wouldn't become a deviation or an amendment to the PUD if it's approved. This is our preferential location for future access. It really sets itself up well for the property to the south. It allows our circulation to be a little bit more fluid. But rather than, again, having to come back to the whole planning process, we wanted to get this in front of you to kind of say, it's not approved yet. We've introduced it to the state. The state knows this is our desire, but it's not there yet. So we just want to make sure you're aware of that. With that in mind, I'm available for any questions you may have. If anyone from here for the public hearing, I'll be glad to come up after they have their questions and answer anything. But if you have any questions for me, I'm available.
So Clyde, on the south side, where this fence is going to be, and where the stubs are going in to the south side,
Yes, sir.
is that fence going to be all the way, in the beginning, is that fence going to go all the way across, including across the stubs? So,
Yes.
Or, okay, that's,
It'll look curious for a while, and really,
Right.
the planning staff wanted to make sure it's solid, so there wouldn't be any kind of strobing effect, because it's a rental house now, but you know how that is if it's
Right.
cars are right there. But it's serving the privacy component, the containment component, but also
okay, thank
visual.
you.
And is the 6-foot fence, do we know, is it the same, was it a 6-foot fence on the property to the north? Was that what their buffer is? I just didn't want to make sure we didn't have a 6.
Yeah, we
and an
stayed
8.
consistent, Chairman Jones, with the same way FCC treated the property to the north. We'll just
Okay.
continue that all the way down that
Okay.
western property line.
Okay, and the last thing I'm going to ask, and maybe, Matthew, this is a question, so we approve the plan book like this with that, is the page in the plan book that shows the alternate
Yes.
lower? Okay,
Is this a way to try to be proactive? Because, that could be to have to go back through a 4 to 6 month process for something that could possibly.
and was, all staff was okay either place?
I think in speaking with Mr. Balachandra, I think his preference is actually to move it further to the south. So I think we're okay either way. However, in talking to Mr. McGuire, who's been the one who's been in discussions with TDOT, I think he said it's more likely that it will be the one on the north side rather than the one on the south side. But they want to keep their options open, and I think we're okay with that. I think they're able to meet all requirements either way.
Yeah. Looks like the south side would be the preferable for sure, but, we got TDOT, so.
Yeah, it's a
That's
slow
the
moving.
problem, Mr. McGuire. So, anybody else, I just want to make sure they're both in there and, that does cover you in case.
Chris McGuire with Helston Steel Engineering. I did just want to throw it out there. We had spoke with TDOT about the southern entrance because that is what's preferred for us as well. The issue that we run into is per their entrance permit requirements, you have to have your driveway 20 feet off the property line. In order to get that to line up with that side drive aisle, we have to be 5 feet off. So we can't meet their current requirements, and we'd have to go through a variance request process, which seemed like it may be a coin toss as to whether we get it or not. We wanted to put it in there so you didn't have to see this twice, but well, not holding our breath on getting the lower entrance, but we'd like to.
Understandable. All right, any other questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We will open the public hearing and ask if we have anybody that would like to come forward and speak on the zoning application for this property. Anybody? Okay. We will close the public hearing. Any other questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
If there are none, I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second, Ms. Jacob.
Ms. Saberwater,
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Prince,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye. Okay. Our next item is a zoning application for approximately 2.2 acres located along West Thompson Lane to be rezoned from RS-15 to PRD, and this is Kings Landing Annex PRD. Black Diamond Development is the applicant. Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our final public hearing of the night is for 2.2 acres located along the north side of West Thompson Lane. It is surrounded on the east, west, and north sides by the developing Kings Landing Villas subdivision. Kings Landing Villas was approved by Planning Commission and Council about 2 or 3 years ago. It includes both single-family residential detached homes on its east side and single-family residential attached homes, townhomes, on its west side. This particular property, there was an existing home on it, and I think it was always anticipated that it would at some point become a part of this development, just because it was surrounded, and Mr. Friedson, the developer, had been in contact with the owner. However, the owner was not ready to sell at the time that they brought the zoning request in for the original Kings Landing Villas zoning request. So the owner has sold to Mr. Friedson. I believe the closing has occurred, our Black Diamond Development, and so now they are ready to rezone this property to essentially incorporate it into their Kings Landing Villas zoning. However, to kind of keep it separate, we asked them to call this Kings Landing Villas Annex PRD, so it would be a separate PRD. The product for the single-family homes and the product for the townhomes are identical to what they had approved by Planning Commission and Council back several years ago. Essentially, the north-south road called Kings Drive that you see on the aerial photo before you that's under construction here in this photo has single-family detached homes on both sides of it. So there will be 6 single-family detached homes fronting on Kings Drive on this property as well. And then on the west side of the development, Westeros Way, I think is the name of the roadway. There will be 12 single-family attached homes, townhomes, consistent with what is proposed to be built in the existing Kings Landing Villas planned development. Mr. Roundtree can elaborate on anything regarding the existing development if you need him to. As you've driven by it, you may have seen that it has been under development for several years now. But they are proposing common areas along the front for stormwater management, and there will be landscaping and berming along that stormwater management area. All of the amenities are on the north end of the development. I think a dog park, a pavilion, and the mail kiosk and a playground, I believe. So all of those are on the north end of the development. Those will not change. We need to conduct a public hearing on this matter tonight, but before we do that, Mr. Roundtree has a brief presentation on the proposed zoning request from single-family residential to PRD.
Thank you, Matthew. Chairman Jones, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree, Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm here with Chris McGuire, engineering the project, and also both Randy Friedson and Kelly Wilson are here from Black Diamond Construction if you have any questions for them in particular. Thank you, Matthew, for the introduction. Yeah, just real brief. Matthew did a great job explaining it. It's fairly straightforward. I think the thing that's really important, let me just turn to the site plan because I think this is worth mentioning. So when we started this process, as Matthew mentioned a few years ago, Matthew, Margaret, and the planning department always wanted us to incorporate this house into the overall master plan with the presumption that one day that house would be sold and that I think, Randy, did you have first rights on that house from the get-go? So it was always negotiated that they would have first rights on that piece of property, the 2.2 acres in the middle. So, as far as the amenities and all the required open space and green space, that was all built into the mix from the initial conception of the master plan, which I think is good foresight on Matthew's part to make sure that that was accommodated for. There's been a little bit of variation. The only thing that's varied as far as the overall master plan is those 3 ponds have changed a little bit of character. We're receiving water that's coming in from the west. Mr. Burns' development's to the west of us. We're taking care of his water. And Mr. Friedman, Mr. Burns have been working through negotiations on how that's going to work. So with that in mind, I just wanted to just bring that to your attention. We did update the architecture in terms of we have a current seal from the architect who provided the original drawings. We just wanted to make sure that that was active because it's been a while since we've gone through the process. All the garages can accommodate 2 cars within the garage. That was a concern originally on the townhomes. They're going to be 1 car, 2 car. So all the townhomes are 2 car. All the single family homes are 2 car garages with 4 cars in the driveway. The only exception we're asking to on the whole project is an exception we're seeing a lot of, where we allow the front facade to come into the front right of way. So we're asking for a 10-foot deviation from the 35-foot setback to allow for the houses to encroach upon that front right of way, with the driveway still remaining at the 35 feet so we can get the 4 cars loaded in the driveway. But besides that, it's very consistent from the original pattern book, except for the fact that, now we're calling it annex and kind of went through and made sure everything was updated to the current plan.
And one thing that I would mention, if this moves forward from Planning Commission tonight, that I've mentioned to Mr. Roundtree, to prevent any confusion, the text of the book states that all the garages for the townhomes would be 2-car garages. The elevation that's been provided in the pattern book, one of those units in a row of 4 townhomes has a 1-car garage. So we want to prevent any confusion about what's correct. And so I've asked him prior to City Council, if this moves forward tonight, to provide a revised elevation in the pattern book showing all the townhome units with 2-car garages.
We've agreed to that.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Roundtree before we open the public hearing? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roundtree. That will open the public hearing and ask if there's anybody that would like to come forward tonight to speak on the zoning application for this property. Okay. We will close the public hearing. And if there's not any other questions, we're ready for a motion.
Motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Jacko?
Ms. Savelwater?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Prince?
Aye.
Mr. Salas?
Aye.
Chair Jones?
Aye. Okay, that concludes our public hearings for tonight. We will move on to staff reports and other business, and we do have a couple of items there tonight. Our first item is a mandatory referral to consider the dedication of an electric easement on city-owned property located at 2032 Blanton Drive. Murfreesboro Water Resources Department is the applicant. Mr. Blumley.
Yes, ma'am, I'll take that one. This is a mandatory referral for the dedication of an electric easement on the wastewater treatment plant property that the city owns. Because it's a real estate transaction on city-owned property, does require approval of a mandatory referral. This is in conjunction with a project that I won't even pretend to know what it is. It's for the installation of a thermal dryer. I'm sure Mr. Hankins knows more about that. I can't really...
More than he wants to.
Yeah. But I can't really describe what that is, chapter and verse. But only thing to say, I would say that the Water Resources Department wants to construct that improvement, and in order to provide electricity to it, the electric service is necessary, and this easement will be needed to facilitate that. So we would request that you approve this mandatory referral, or that you recommend approval to City Council for the dedication of this electric easement on this city-owned property. Be happy to answer any questions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Jacob?
Ms. Savelwater,
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Prince,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye. Okay. Next, we have a zoning application for approximately 3.97 acres located along Southgate Boulevard and Westgate Boulevard to be rezoned from CH and CF to PUD, Westgate Commons PUD. Southgate Developers LLC is the applicant. Mr. Barbie, good evening.
Good evening, Chair Jones and Murfreesboro Planning Commission. This might look very familiar to you. This application was previously before you at the February 7th day meeting. Since that meeting, the applicant has requested one very minor change to the plan book that was submitted. They're requesting to add what I would call a fueling island to the west of the proposed structure. That would be behind the structure. It would not be visible from the public right-of-way, for the installation of a 1,000-gallon split diesel and gasoline fuel tank. The tank would be used to fuel vehicles and equipment that they're going to be utilizing at the rental location. The total affected area is 400 square feet, and that would encapsulate the concrete pad that's necessary for it, the bollards, the tank, the pumps, and the enclosure that they're going to include to go around the tank itself. While the total area is 400 square feet, the tank area itself is just slightly over 70 square feet. Staff reviewed the request, didn't really feel like it constituted holding an additional public hearing just because of the scope of what was wanting to be changed. However, staff did want to get it before you tonight and get your approval on the item before it appears at City Council. I'm available if you have any questions, and Mr. Taylor is also in the audience still with us.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or concerns regarding the little fueling station in there?
If there are none, I make a motion that we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second motion.
Motion and a second. Ms. Jacob?
Ms. Savelwater,
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Prince,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barbie. Do we have any other staff reports or other business tonight?
I do not.
Okay. If there is none, we stand adjourned.